Do you know what I hate most about politics and the media, especially here in Canada? The inseparability between mainstream media journalists and Canada's Liberals. I mean, how often do we see media party journalists slide into communications positions every time a Liberal campaign kicks off or a Liberal government takes power? And today I have a story that exemplifies this type of media corruption. Scott Feschuk was, until mid-September, a columnist for Maclean's magazine. Canadians know it well. It's owned by the multi-billion-dollar Rogers Media, and yet they still receive $1.5 million of our tax dollars each year. Before that, Feschuk worked in Paul Martin's Prime Minister's office as his chief speechwriter. And well, you could guess his job before landing that position in the Liberal PMO. You guessed it, a journalist for the Globe and Mail. He was sent packing from the PMO after Stephen Harper was elected, and shortly after Feschuk began his column at Maclean's. But that did not stop Feschuk's career as a speechwriter for Canada's Liberals. After Paul Martin's defeat, he and Feschuk-Reid, who was Martin's senior advisor and communications director, formed Feschuk-Reid, a speechwriting firm. And boy oh boy has Feschuk-Reid been raking in the contracts for the Trudeau Liberals. We just received the latest in a series of exclusive access to information packets on the contracts this government has taken out with Feschuk-Reid, and the latest just reeks of Liberal cronyism. In March, Judy Foote, the Minister of Public Services and Procurement, was set to give a speech to the St. John's, Newfoundland Board of Trade, and Feschuk-Reid was hired to prepare the speech for Minister Foote. But as the internal emails reveal, Feschuk-Reid was not on the list of approved firms for the project, so they were left to scramble on how to get this contract approved for their Liberal friend. Well, Feschuk-Reid was ultimately approved a few days later. But internal emails reveal that at one point, the Director General had to intervene to stop this from being a verbal contract. You know, after the sponsorship scandal and the Gomery inquiry, Liberals should know this is the exact kind of behavior that got them in so much trouble about a decade ago. Now, this was not an isolated contract either. Catherine McKenna, our Environment Minister, has granted numerous contracts to Feschuk-Reid, including one for media training where Feschuk himself came to Ottawa to help her. Again, this was a sole source contract to their Liberal friend. You don't suppose the reason it could be that Catherine McKenna decided to give these contracts to Feschuk was because her husband, Scott Gilmore, is also a fellow columnist at Maclean's? The Trudeau Liberals seem to be exchanging writing contracts for favorable coverage. Talk about cronyism and the corruption of the media. For the Rebel.media, I'm Christopher Wilson. You know, unlike Maclean's, we're not owned by a multi-billion-dollar media company like Rogers, and we certainly don't get a single cent from the federal government. So how can you help us? Well, I've got an idea. You can check out our brand new premium content this fall, including a new show from my friend Sheila Gunn-Reid called The Gun Show. And if you sign up to become a premium member, you'll get all the access to these exclusive shows only on the Rebel.media.